Joining us now for more on this is Representative Mariannette Miller-Meeks. She's a Republican of Iowa. We spoke with you, Representative, after President Biden's recent speech there on Capitol Hill. I'm really appreciative you were able to take the time to visit with us again. I really enjoyed my conversation with you last week. So, I mean, listen, I understand. I was just on Capitol Hill all day. Every Republican that I spoke with, either on or off the record, I understand there's frustration. You don't want to talk about the Cheney situation as a whole, but if I can get your general reaction to the voice vote, what it was like there inside the room, and do you feel like the caucus is in a good place right now?
I think the caucus is in a very good place because we know that what's happening in our country is what we really need to deal with, what we need to talk about. So we've got a crisis at the border. We don't have border security, but yet nothing is being done to address that. I have a brother-in-law in Virginia, near Richmond, Virginia, who had to go to 5 gas stations yesterday to get gas. And I myself had seen the price of gasoline here in Washington, D.C. go from $3.19 a gallon to $3.29 a gallon overnight. So we know that there's inflation. We know there's inflation in gasoline prices that started immediately after President Biden was inaugurated. We know that there's inflation in food prices, inflation in housing prices, and every single business owner I talk to in Iowa is having problems getting people to work. And it doesn't matter if it's $16 an hour or if it's even one of the employers I talk to, $80,000 to $130,000 a year salaries. They're having problems getting people to work. So when you're talking about having problems with employment, inflation, a border crisis, places that still haven't reopened their schools, and we've demanded that the CDC have it, investigate why schools weren't reopened and guidance was used from the American Federation of Teachers, that's a problem that we're not following the science. So I think there's so much to talk about that we need to get the message out. We need to be able to interact and talk with people and discuss the things that are happening to them every single day, bread and butter issues at their kitchen table that affect hardworking taxpayers.
There's absolutely no doubt about it. I mean, the things you just listed there are so incredibly important. I think the problem that is standing out in the minds of a lot of people is that this appears to be a fealty test for former President Donald Trump. And I wonder if it concerns you that you do have colleagues like an Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, who's been in the House for quite some time, a Liz Cheney, your colleague there from Wyoming, who are saying, they're looking around at the rest of the party and they're saying, hey, we want to focus on these issues too, but we can't kiss the ring of Donald Trump, who has hijacked the heart and soul of the once great GOP. Do those divisions concern you in your end goal? If you're still trying to work on those issues, Representative Miller-Meeks, does it concern you that right now there's this fealty test towards the former president?
Well, from my perspective, I was a state senator, and when we had, our caucus and our conferences, they were done behind closed doors, and that stayed behind closed doors. And there's a reason for that, as a party, we're unified on our message. We're unified going forward, and those things that I think that all of us feel that are important. So from my standpoint, I'm moving forward. I've got committee assignments. I'm looking at doing what I can in my district, and I'm trying to get people vaccinated so we can get out of this pandemic and get back to normal. That's where I'm going to focus my energies. That's where I'm going to put them, and I'm going to interact with my colleagues, both on the Republican side and on the Democrat side, to make sure that I can get us through the pandemic, and I can get this message across that we need people back to work. We need schools reopened. We need to have summer camps reopened, and we need the CDC to give us guidance on that. I spoke about that on the floor this morning of the House chamber. So I think those are issues that we can focus upon and move forward. The country wants us to move forward. I want to move forward. I had the never-ending campaign. The election is behind me now, and I want to move forward on doing those things that I can to both advance Iowans and advance America.
Let me get a bit more of your thinking. I know you and I talked about this very, very briefly last week there in Capitol Hill on this issue of infrastructure, right? I mean, it's always kind of notable when you have the so-called Big Four going over to the White House, Oval, right? We do this every kind of few years. I mean, is there a good faith effort at this point, or do you think what we saw today, largely with leaders, McConnell and McCarthy and Schumer and Speaker Pelosi sitting there, do we all know where this is going? Are Democrats just going to be forced to rely on budget reconciliation to pass these massive big budget ticket items without Republican support? Or do you think there's a little bit of room for bipartisanship?
I think there's absolutely room for bipartisanship. It's one of the things that I talked about extensively during the campaign. So infrastructure, roads and bridges, locks and dams, broadband. And I think when you see what's happened recently with cybersecurity in the Colonial Pipeline, when you've seen disinformation from Russia on the Pfizer vaccine, and then what the electric grid, I think you have to, add in cybersecurity and electric grid. So we know that Senator Capito, Shelley Moore Capito, is working to come up with bipartisan solution, a bipartisan bill. I think there is good faith effort on the Republican side to tackle infrastructure when it's infrastructure. And I think that there is an appetite for that. So when we're talking about $115 million for roads and bridges, that's $115 billion out of this entire bill. Focus on infrastructure, focus roads and bridges, locks and dams, broadband, electric grid infrastructure. I think that there is a reasonable bipartisan agreement that could be had. And I really think that Republicans are trying to move forward and move us in a bipartisan way towards an infrastructure bill that focuses on those things.
And I know Republicans are going to talk about the pay-fors, and for people at home who don't cover the wonkiness of Congress or know it as intimately as you and I do, pay-for is basically a fancy way of saying how are you going to pay for a bill. So there's suggestions of a gas tax or a user fee, or Democrats floating the rising or raising the corporate tax rate. I assume you're against that last idea, being a Republican, so give me some sense on where you fall on the user fees issue and what can be done through the lens of bipartisanship to help pay for such a large package.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, and that is the lens of bipartisanship. So, we can come together in a bipartisan way. We can discuss and debate on how we pay for infrastructure, but raising taxes, hardworking taxpayers already have seen their costs go up. They already see inflation. They see inflation at the gasoline pump. They see inflation in the grocery store. They see inflation in just trying to do, repairs around their house, or if they want to change their house or, their location. So they see inflation. So to raise taxes in this environment when there's already, the unseen tax of inflation, I think is the wrong thing to do. And most people are smart enough to figure out that when you raise taxes on employers, you're raising taxes on them. So when you raise in taxes on employers, that comes out to lower wages or higher prices. So they know they're going to be taxed. And this is a shell game to say that they're not going to be taxed and we're not going to raise their taxes. I think all of us know, we've seen the government work long enough that when they talk about raising taxes, that's going to come home to hardworking middle class people. That's who's going to pay these taxes.
And I'm out of time, but I wish we did get to talk a bit more about vaccine and vaccine hesitancy. Rejoin us for that conversation because you have a really unique perspective on this. Republican Representative Mariannette Miller-Meeks taking the time to join us here once again from the beautiful state of